Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm just going to give it about 1 more minute to see if we have any people joining, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So we're at the 7 o'clock mark now, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Himalayan Balsam Control and Management in Ontario webinar. Before I turn it over to our amazing speaker today, I'm just going to give a little bit of a rundown on the platform. So you will notice that you have a question box in the side there. So if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in that chat box there, and we will have a question and answer period at the end. And if you are experiencing any technical issues, please feel free to send anything through that chat as well. And we will do our best on our end to help you out there. And if for some reason something happens with your audio during the presentation, there are call-in details in the email link that you received when signing up for this webinar, so you can call in and listen that way. But fingers crossed, technology will be on everyone's side today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Connor from the Ontario Invasive Plant Council to get us started.
All right, thank you, Lauren. I'm gonna keep my camera off for now, just to make sure that I'm coming through clear for everyone on the other end of this presentation. But as Lauren mentioned, my name is Connor Kendall, and I work at the Ontario Invasive Plant Council. So I would like to start off this evening by acknowledging that we are gathered here today from across the traditional territories of Canada's First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. I would like to acknowledge the role of our Indigenous people as stewards of this land and to thank them for their teaching. Before I begin with the presentation, I would also like to give a quick shout out to Belinda Junkin, who is also joining us here tonight. She is the Executive Director of the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, and she's going to be helping out with answering some of the questions in the chat. So in tonight's webinar, we will be taking a look at Himalayan balsam. You're going to be getting an understanding of what it is, as well as where you can find it, some of its impacts, and how it spreads. You'll also learn how to identify it, as well as some different management strategies that you can use in order to control or remove Himalayan balsam from your property. And then we'll also give you a brief overview of how to dispose of it and prevent the spread. Before we do any of that, though, I did want to give you a brief overview of what the Ontario Invasive Plant Council is. So the Ontario Invasive Plant Council is a not-for-profit organization working in partnership with professionals and community members throughout Ontario. It serves as a forum for collaborative and coordinated action towards invasive plants, which pose a substantial threat to Ontario's environment, economy, and society. Through research, networking development, and knowledge sharing, we support on-the-ground initiatives to prevent, detect, and manage invasive plants throughout Ontario. The OIPC is also a chapter of the Canadian Council on Invasive Species, representing Ontario on this national board, providing a national voice, and working together to build practical solutions to prevent the spread of invasive species. The Canadian Council on Invasive Species also provides national behavior change campaigns for government and organizations, such as their Don't Let It Loose and Drain Clean Dry campaigns. At the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, our board of directors includes representatives from federal and provincial government agencies, municipalities, First Nations, conservation authorities, agriculture, industry, and various non-governmental organizations. This network provides a valuable forum for coordinated action in the province. Here at the OIPC, we also offer a number of different webinars and workshops, but those are just one of the things that we do offer. Some of you may also be familiar with our Grow Me Instead guide. The Grow Me Instead guide is one of our most sought out resources that was actually created by one of our committees, the Horticulture Outreach Collaborative. It was created to assist gardeners in making informed decisions about the plants that they are buying for their gardens, helping to educate and avoid the use of invasive plants. This guide provides a lot of information about garden plants and also provides some specific alternatives to some common invasive plants that a lot of people plant in their gardens. This guide is actually available to be downloaded for free on the OIPC website if you wanted to learn more there. The OIPC has also developed a guide called the Municipal Strategy Framework that is now used throughout the province as a template to create municipal strategies and plans. This guide formed the basis of the City of London invasive plant management strategy, and the OIPC has also supported and assisted other municipalities creating municipal strategies, as well as hosting workshops for municipal staff and consultants. The OIPC promotes the use of a coordinated and planned approach to invasive plant management and considers the human health, biodiversity, species at risk, economical and social impacts of invasive plants. We also work directly with municipalities in a consulting role to create or assist with the creation of these strategies. And finally, the OIPC is probably best known for our best management practices guides and technical bulletins, such as our newly published technical bulletin on Himalayan balsam, which is the basis of the webinar tonight. These documents are used by professionals across the province and provide a comprehensive review of the plant, its life cycle, and the latest information on control methods. We have a number of best management practices guides and technical bulletins for various invasive plants freely available on our website, including the 6 brand new BMPs. And again, all of these resources and more are available on our website. So tonight's webinar is brought to you as part of the EDRR network. So what exactly is EDRR? Well, EDRR stands for Early Detection and Rapid Response. The EDRR network Ontario was created in 2015 by the Invasive Species Centre and the Ontario Invasive Plant Council to enhance research, outreach, and management efforts to control invasive species in Ontario, and it has been sponsored by the Ontario Trillium Foundation. We work to create a community action network that will train and equip people with the skills and resources needed to detect, report, and respond to invasive species in Ontario. It takes an eyes-on-the-ground approach to stopping new introductions and the further spread of invasive species. The overarching goal is to provide the tools, training, and resources necessary to help slow the spread and the introduction of invasive species in Ontario through education and outreach. In 2020, the Eastern Ontario Model Forest Organization was added to our partnership to expand expertise and knowledge in Eastern Ontario. So why do we need EDRR? Well, controlling invasive species before they become established in an area will reduce their impact on human health, biodiversity, the economy, and society. Essentially, what this means is the sooner a species is detected, the easier it will be to remove or control it, and the less it will cost to do so. So why are we focusing on Eastern Ontario? Well, the initial 2-year pilot project that was funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation included 2 areas of Southern Ontario around the Halton and Peel region. Our focus then turned to the north, focusing on Sudbury, Manitoulin, and Sault Ste. Marie for the next 2 years. The Ontario Trillium Foundation continues to provide funding for this program in 2020 and 2021 by shifting our focus and expanding our network into the Quinte, Kingston, and Rideau regions of Eastern Ontario. From an invasive species perspective, the shift to Eastern Ontario was extremely necessary because there are many species that are currently present in Southern Ontario, as well as in the northeastern United States, that have not yet been detected in this region of Ontario. In addition, there are a number of international border crossings with the US and international shipping routes through the St. Lawrence Seaway that are increasing the number of human-facilitated pathways of species introduction. Therefore, we've decided that there is a need to equip individuals in this region with the skills and resources they need to respond to an invasive species. So moving on now to the main topic of tonight's webinar, we're going to be taking a look at Himalayan balsam. It goes by several different names, so you might also know it as poor man's orchid, policeman's helmet, ornamental jewelweed, or Indian touch-me-not. For the purpose of tonight's webinar, we are only going to be referring to it as Himalayan balsam. So Himalayan balsam is an annual herbaceous plant that is native to the Himalayan region of Asia, hence the name. It was introduced to North America in the early 1800s as an ornamental in urban landscapes and gardens, as well as a hitchhiker in the ship ballast water. It's considered to be a highly invasive plant in riparian and wetland areas. What a riparian area is it's just that the area along a riverbank. It also has very impressive growth rates, where some plants are able to reach up to 3 meters tall. Himalayan balsam has been very successful at escaping cultivation and invading natural areas, and it has been reported in 8 provinces in Canada, including British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, and Newfoundland. It is adapted to living in cool climates due to its native habitat of the Himalayas, which is the reason why it has been easily distributed throughout North America, and that's also the reason why you can see it on the map all the way up to the Thunder Bay and Dryden areas. So where can you find Himalayan balsam? Well, it's typically found along areas adjacent to streams, edges of watercourses, or in damp woods, and it tends to prefer disturbed riparian systems. So again, those systems that are along riverbanks. It thrives in nutrient-rich, moist, natural areas that have a moderate soil disturbance, and it does really well all the way from partial shade to full sunlight. It's also considered to be intolerant of drought, where if it does not have an adequate water supply, it will quickly wilt. And again, it can grow in shaded environments, wet meadows, forest-cut walks, and damp natural woodlands, but it's also found in some places such as forest plantations and clearings, railway embankments, urban areas, and along roadside ditches. So moving back a little bit, what is an invasive species? Well, an invasive species is one that has been introduced from another geographic region to an area outside its natural range. Invasive species are usually introduced to a new ecosystem through human activity, and their introduction or spread threatens the environment, the economy, and/or the society. That being said, taking a look back again at Himalayan balsam, it has a number of impacts on the environment. The first of which is that it creates very dense stands that prevent native plants from establishing, which overall reduces the biodiversity and the ecological value of that area. It's also a very prolific nectar producer, where the nectar is actually extremely sweet. So what this does, it will actually draw the pollinators, such as the bees and butterflies, away from other nearby native plants and actually attracts them to the Himalayan balsam plant instead. Research has also shown that invertebrate biodiversity is negatively impacted by Himalayan balsam, which as a result leads to fragmented and destabilized ecosystem, which overall impacts the ecosystem functions. Himalayan balsam also has a number of impacts on the economy and society, one of which is that it aggressively replaces native plants along riverbanks. So what happens is the native plants usually have a deeper root system that will reinforce the riverbanks, but when Himalayan balsam is there instead, it has a very shallow root system, which will destabilize the banks and lead to soil erosion, which will then, as a result, have impacts to the water quality because of an increased sedimentation. This excess sedimentation also negatively affects fish reproduction, where it smothers spawning areas. Himalayan balsam also dies in the fall, which then again leaves the riverbanks bare and prone to further erosion by the elements. And that dead plant material can also enter into waterways and increase the risk of flooding. It's also very expensive to remove, where in the UK, it was estimated to be between 150 to 300 million pounds to eradicate Himalayan balsam, which is equivalent to about 260 to 520 million Canadian dollars. It's also considered to restrict the access to the rivers, so then that would have a direct impact on the recreational value of those waterways. Himalayan balsam reproduces exclusively via seed. It's considered to be a very prolific seed producer where one plant can produce anywhere from 700 to 800 seeds. And the seed bank can last up to 18 months, where the seeds will require a period of chilling to be viable again the next year. So essentially what that means is as long as it goes through a winter period in Canada, the seeds will be viable again in the spring. The seeds will typically germinate in the early spring, where it has a high germination rate of approximately 80%. And it also has something that's referred to as exploding seed capsules. And I'll show you what this means in a second. But these typically will send the seeds into the air and away from the parent plant about 3 to 5 meters. And this typically happens from August to October. So here's just a quick video for you to visualize what I mean by those exploding seed pods. So as you can see in the video, if you disturb or touch the seed pod, it will then explode and the seeds will be released away from the parent plant. Obviously, we don't recommend you doing what the person in this video did, going up to the plant and physically using force to burst open the seeds, because that's just going to contribute to the spread. But it's a great video to show you what that looks like. So as the video shows, the primary form of spread is those exploding seed pods. So when they are mature and then they're disturbed or touched, those seed pods will release the seeds again anywhere from 3 to 5 meters. Longer distance dispersal can be aided by flowing water, which is why you'll usually see Himalayan balsam by waterways. So what happens is when those seeds explode out of their pods, they were then released into the air and can enter into nearby waterways. And because they're fairly buoyant, they'll float downstream where they're then able to repopulate new areas. Shorter distance dispersal can also be aided by the wind. So again, when those seeds are entered into the air surrounding the plant, if it's a windy day, the wind will carry the seeds greater than 5 meters away. Himalayan balsam is also spread by human actions. So things such as the transportation of contaminated soil is one of the major pathways of spread. And humans also have been planting Himalayan balsam in their gardens due to its fast-growing nature and attractive appearance. So now that you know what Himalayan balsam is, you have an understanding of how it reproduces and how it spreads. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the key identification features. The first one we're going to be taking a look at is the stem. The stems are hollow and smooth, and they're roughly to be about 0.5 to 5 centimeters in diameter. They tend to appear a purple to reddish color, but they can also appear more green, as you can see in that second photo. And again, these stems are able to grow anywhere from 1 to 3 meters tall. Going off of the stems, the roots are usually fairly shallow, but they can grow up to 15 centimeters deep. So the flowers are probably one of the key identifying features of Himalayan balsam. A lot of people refer to them as looking like a British policeman's helmet. So essentially, if you don't know what that means, what it means is that it will have a larger middle portion, then it will have a front and a back brim. The flowers are also, they'll have 5 petals that will be either pink, white, or purple. And then it will also have about 5 to 10 flowers per stem. So these 2 photos here will show some of the color variations, but again, some of the plants might be lighter and some of them might be darker than these 2 shown here. So as far as the leaves go, they are considered to be opposite, which means that they appear across from one another on the stem, and they're usually paired. However, on the upper leaves, they're usually arranged in a whorl of 3. What a whorl means is it just means that they're arranged in a circle around the stem, which you can see in this photo. The leaves will typically range in size from 6 to 15 centimeters long, and they're widest in the middle. And they also have a fairly sharply toothed edge as well, which you can make out in both of these photos. And again, going back to those seed pods, the capsules range in size from 1 to 3 centimeters, but some can be as big as 3 to 5 centimeters long. Each one of these seed pods contains up to 16 seeds, and then again, when they mature, they will explode and release those seeds. So Himalayan balsam has a couple different lookalikes that you should be aware of in Ontario. The first one is common jewelweed, which is a native plant to Ontario. It's a related species that's native to North America, and it has yellow-orange flowers. It's fairly widespread throughout Ontario, so you'll see this everywhere from Southern Ontario all the way up to Northern Ontario. The next one is pale jewelweed, and again, this is another native plant to North America, and it's closely related to common jewelweed. Pale jewelweed, the flowers are more yellow and they have reddish spots, and this one you'll see more often in Southern Ontario. The main difference between these two jewelweed species and Himalayan balsam is obviously the color of the flowers, where these ones are orange and yellow, and Himalayan balsam is that, again, white to pink to purple. The next one you should be looking out for would be garden balsam. This plant's actually another invasive species that's native to Asia. So similar to Himalayan balsam, the flowers are pink or red or lilac or white, but they're very different shape than Himalayan balsam. So they don't have that same policeman helmet that the Himalayan balsam flowers have. Another thing to look out for with these ones is that the leaves are more narrow than Himalayan balsam, where the Himalayan balsam ones are usually about 7 centimeters at their widest point, and these ones are much more narrow. And this one's not super common in Ontario, but it is something that you might see in Southern Ontario. The next one would be wild bleeding heart, and this is another native plant to North America. The main difference with this one is that it appears to be more fern-like, and again has a different shaped pink flower than Himalayan balsam. Another difference would be that the leaves are lobed versus your standard leaf shape. So this means is that we'll just have many different components to the leaf versus your standard leaf shape, similar to garden balsam. And again, there's very few reports of wild bleeding heart in Ontario, but most of them are in Southern Ontario. So it's just important to be aware that you might come across this and confuse it for Himalayan balsam. So now that you know what Himalayan balsam is and how to identify it, we can go ahead and take a look at some of the different ways that you can manage it. With the management of any invasive plant, the goal of management is always to prevent or reduce the spread to new areas and reduce or eradicate existing populations using the most efficient and effective strategies that have the lowest impact on surrounding native species. For Himalayan balsam, a 99% control efficiency has been shown to be almost as ineffective as no management at all. So that shows you how important it is to make sure you are using the most efficient and effective strategy. So when it comes to Himalayan balsam management, there are some key things that you should consider. The first thing you should be considering is your site priority. So Himalayan balsam, as I mentioned, it commonly spreads by seeds floating downstream. So your control should start with the upper populations first to limit the dispersal and prevent the spread, or prevent the seed from being carried downstream to sites that were previously managed. You should also focus on higher priority sites, such as those near environmentally significant areas or wetlands or areas where there's species at risk. Moving on to the control methods, your control methods will be dependent on the population size and maturity, as well as the resource availability. It's going to be easier to control Himalayan balsam if it's a smaller population. And conducting control following the seed set is obviously not ideal. So if the seeds have already developed, it is often better to wait until the following season. But for if any reason you can't wait until the following season, I will be showing you what you can do instead and how to protect the plant from spreading further. As far as resource availability go, you should be considering things such as specific tools that might help you, whether or not you have any friends or volunteers that could help, or community groups. You'll be considering whether or not you have support from an environmental agency, or if you have funding to hire external contractors to do things such as herbicide application. You should also be very aware to take some precautions and other key considerations. So again, you should be considering the site accessibility. With Himalayan balsam, it's primarily found in sensitive aquatic environments, so the control with heavy machinery is not recommended. And again, sometimes with those riverbanks, they can be steep and hard to access, so you should be taking these into account before you begin any removal. And you should also be trying to limit the disturbance to any surrounding native plants. One thing that you should always consider is how you will dispose of the plant material. So we'll be taking a look at some different methods that you can use. But one thing you should always keep in mind is how will you get that plant material from point A, from where you're removing the plant, to point B, where you're disposing of it. You should also consider how you will be controlling for the spread of the seed. So as I mentioned, if management cannot be postponed and seeds are present, just simply place a bag over the top while doing your removal, and that should prevent the pods from exploding and dispersing further. You should also always try to clean any equipment, boots, and clothing on site, and not remove any of the soil that could contain seeds. And a great resource for that would be the Ontario Invasive Plant Council's Clean Equipment Protocol, which is also available on our website. You should also consider the impact of control techniques and the resulting bare soil on adjacent watercourses. You should time your removal work during a period that minimizes risk to fish species as well as species at risk. And it's often recommended to consult with a qualified environmental professional when working around water bodies or with species at risk. With the permits and permissions, the detailed information about permits is beyond the scope of this webinar. However, you should be aware that for any invasive plant control project, the type of permits you will need and the governing bodies that will provide them will depend on the location and the method of your project. So you might need a permit if you're working in an environmentally significant wetland, if you're working near species at risk or in their habitat, or if you're doing any chemical or herbicide treatments. And you should also be aware that some municipalities will not allow you to remove plants from their properties without permission, regardless of whether that plant is invasive or not. If you are ever unsure about the permits you need or where to obtain them, you can ask your local conservation authority or your local Ministry of Northern Development, Mines, Natural Resources, and Forestry office. So now we can go ahead and take a look at some of the different management strategies that you can use for Himalayan balsam. We'll take a look at those that you can do without any specialized training, such as hand pulling, digging, cutting, and mowing. And those that require some specialized training we'll mention, but we won't go into detail about those, such as herbicide application. So the first one is hand pulling or digging. So this is an ideal management strategy for small populations. Because Himalayan balsam has a very shallow root system and it's found in fairly moist soils, this allows for a very easy removal by pulling. And it's often believed that hand pulling and cutting, which we'll look at in a second, are the most effective and appropriate methods because Himalayan balsam is often intermixed with native vegetation and is often found in sensitive sites that can't be mowed or sprayed. So when you would go about hand pulling, you would simply use some gloves. You would grab the base of the plant as close to the soil as you can and pull it straight out from the ground, aiming to remove as much of the root as possible. Alternatively, you can use a hand tool such as a spade if the soils are compacted to help loosen up those soils. This manual control method is best done before and during flower, so that would be late May to mid-July. And again, if the seeds are present, place a bag over the top to prevent the pods from exploding and dispersing further. With any type of removal strategy, you should always aim to remove all of the plants from the area because leftover plants can quickly recolonize. And you should always continue to monitor the site for any regrowth later in the season and for at least 2 years because of the 18-month seed bank. So similar to hand pulling, cutting is considered to be the most effective and appropriate method. It's best to cut as close to the soil surface as you can, ideally below the lowest node. So what a node is, it's this part of the stem where the leaves and the lateral buds are attached, and they tend to look like a raised portion of the stem. So with these two photos here, this is what a node would look like. But as you can see, there's a node lower than that, so you'd want to cut below that. And the same with this photo, there's a node right there, so you'd want to cut below that as well. If you don't cut below the lowest node, the plant can regrow and flower later in the season. And ideally, you'll want to cut once while it's in full flower, but before the seeds emerge, so that's early to mid-July. And again, if the management can't be postponed and there are seeds present, place a bag over the top. Alternatively, you can cut the top of the plant to prevent the seed formation. What this will do is it will just simply give you more time. It won't eradicate the population. It will just simply give you some more time and prevent it from spreading further while you figure out the best course of action. And again, similar to hand pulling, continue to monitor the site for any new regrowth. So mowing is a method that's not usually recommended for Himalayan balsam due to its location in its very sensitive aquatic environments. Because of its location, heavy machinery will often do more damage than it does do any good. So typically, you want to avoid the techniques that will damage or disturb the soil because this will just increase the chances of invasive species of moving in. That being said, mowing can be suitable for large populations in non-riparian sites, such as those that aren't along river banks or close to aquatic environments. This should only be done in areas where you can ensure that disturbance will be minimized, so in areas where it's not intermixed with native vegetation. So similar to cutting, you're going to want to cut as close to the soil as possible, and again, below the lowest node. Regular mowing can be effective even if it is above the lowest node. You'll just need to ensure that the frequency is high enough to prevent the formation of flowers and seeds. It's best to do this in June or July before the seed pods form. And again, this is not recommended to be done in aquatic or sensitive habitats. The next one you should be aware of is herbicide application. This is something that can only be undertaken by professionals and requires certification and specialized training for the safe and effective use. That being said, it's worth mentioning so that you are aware that it is an option should you choose to go that route. Chemical control for Himalayan balsam is effective, but it's not usually possible nor advisable as this species is primarily found in wet sites. And there are currently no pesticides available for their use in or near water in Ontario for Himalayan balsam control. For areas where herbicides can be used, it's best to do it when the leaves emerge and before it goes to the flower, so that would be in the spring. And again, before applying any herbicide for any purpose, make sure it's approved for the use you are intending. Make sure you have permission to use it. And this is where that permitting will come into play. So if you do have any specific questions regarding your herbicide application, these can be directed toward the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. So another thing you should be aware of is a biological control. So this is not something you will be doing on your own, and it's not something that's currently available in Canada. but it is worth mentioning so that you are aware of some of the research that is going on with regards to Himalayan balsam. So what a biological control is, it's the introduction of an insect, disease, or fungi that is a natural enemy in the plant's native range. So the Center for Agriculture and Bioscience International has been conducting surveys in the plant's native range and has identified a fungus that's currently being tested to see if it is a suitable biocontrol for Himalayan balsam. So again, there's no current biological control available for Himalayan balsam in Canada, but it might be an option in the future. So with any invasive plant management, there might come a time when you want to consult a professional. So you'll want to consult a professional when you have very large or well-established sites, or if there are species at risk present. You'll also want to consult a professional if a herbicide is to be applied, or if you're just feeling generally overwhelmed with the whole situation and you don't know where to start. When you are asking for professional help, it's best to ask the right questions. So here are a couple that you can consider. So the first one is, what herbicide will you be using, in what concentrations, and how will it be applied? Are you comfortable explaining this work to members of the public who approach you? Will you be following up to monitor the site? And what steps do you take to limit impacts to native species? So now that you've removed Himalayan balsam, what do you do with it? Well, you're not going to want to compost any viable plant material. So you're not going to want to compost the seeds or any plants that might have seeds. This is because only high temperatures will kill Himalayan balsam seeds, and your backyard compost and most municipal compost facilities won't reach a high enough temperature to actually kill off those seeds. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to solarize the plant material. So what this means is that you'll grab some black plastic bags and you'll put all of the plant material, such as the flowers and seed heads, in these. You'll seal them tight, and then you'll leave them in direct sun for anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks to make sure that the plant material is dead before you send it to a landfill. Once you're sure that the plant material is dead, you can send the bag material to a landfill or another certified high heat compost program. Alternatively, you can use brown yard waste bags, but with these, you're going to want to cover those with a dark colored tarp to do that same solarizing that the black plastic bags would do. With this, you'll just want to be extra cautious to make sure that the plant material is dead before you dispose of it. So guidelines for disposal of invasive plant material is going to vary by municipality. So you're going to want to contact your local landfill facility to inquire before you dispose of anything. Alternatively, you might be able to dispose of the pulled or chemically treated plant material on site. You're only going to be able to do this, and I repeat, only going to be able to do this if the flowers and seed pods have not formed. Because Himalayan balsam is soft and easily damaged, it won't regrow once it's dried thoroughly. So if you are going to leave it on site, you're going to leave the piles to dry and compost, which will usually take 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the pile size. And you can either leave these piles exposed to the air or covered with a tarp. And again, that tarp's just going to encourage the composting. It's important to note that rerooting from the nodes can occur, but this is most likely going to occur in cool or wet weather. But if you want to reduce any chance of this happening, you can place a tarp underneath the compost piles, or you can elevate the pile above the ground to let them dry thoroughly. And again, do not compost if the seeds are present. So once you've removed Himalayan balsam, it's also important to restore and monitor the site for any regrowth. Himalayan balsam reseeds very easily, and it will readily colonize disturbed sites. So restoration is recommended to prevent the regrowth of Himalayan balsam or the introduction of other invasive species. So what you can do is you can reintroduce native species to reduce available space for Himalayan balsam to return. You can also consider planting some native perennials that are well suited to the growing conditions on the site. And to make sure with that, what you can do is you can just take a look around to see what's already growing there and encourage some of those native plant species to recolonize by aiding in their seed dispersal. If planting or seeding is not feasible, the site can be tarped or mulched to prevent further growth. And again, with any management, follow-up monitoring and the removal of new growth throughout the season is crucial for success. And with regards to Himalayan balsam in particular, you're going to want to at least monitor it for a minimum of 2 years because of that 18-month seed bank. If you do happen to see some new plants growing, you can just simply hand pull those before they can go to seed. So before we end tonight, I want to just give you some general tips and takeaways for the management of Himalayan balsam and invasive plants more generally. So invasive species management is a long-term task. It's not going to happen overnight, and you're going to have to work at it over multiple years. And again, with Himalayan balsam in particular, you're going to want to monitor for the regrowth over at least a 2-year period. You're going to want to use the tools and resources available to you. So as we've seen with Himalayan balsam, it's best controlled by hand pulling and cutting. So your best tool will be your hands. And you're also going to want to limit the disturbance and the impacts to native species. This is because a lot of invasive species, not just Himalayan balsam, actually thrive and will spread into disturbed areas very easily. So how do you go about preventing the spread of Himalayan balsam and other invasive plants? The first thing you can do is report it. You can take a picture, record the location where you saw it, and report it using one of the online reporting methods, which we'll go over in a second. You can continue to watch for it, so learn how to recognize different invasive plants and continue to monitor the areas where they may be introduced. As we know, early detection can make it easier and less expensive to remove or control them in the long term. You'll also want to stay on designated trails, so avoid traveling off any trails and in areas that are known to have invasive plants. What this does is it will reduce the likelihood of you unknowingly picking up seeds or plant material on your clothes and shoes and transporting them to different areas. That being said, you'll want to also inspect, clean, and remove any mud, seeds, or plant material from your clothing, your pets, your vehicles and equipment, or anything else that might have come into contact with it. You're going to want to clean your vehicles and equipment in an area away from the natural areas where they aren't likely to spread. So places like a car wash or a driveway would be ideal. You can also keep it natural by avoiding disturbing the soils and never removing native plants. Leaving the soil bare and vulnerable by removing native plants or disturbing the soil just increases the likelihood of different invasive plants of moving in. If by any chance there are invasive plant seeds that are already in the soil, the disruption could cause them to germinate, which again is not an ideal situation. And finally, you can use native species when you are gardening in your own yard. As we noticed, Himalayan balsam was introduced as an ornamental in the horticulture industry. So instead, you could choose to use local native plants in your garden and to do your research before buying any plants. A good starting point would be our Grow Me Instead guide, which again is a great resource to help you make informed choices. So going back to the reporting, you can report it online using the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System, or EDMAPS. This lets you specify the location and upload photos, as well as some other additional details with regards to your plant observation. When you submit your observation, an expert will then review it to confirm that the plant that you identified is actually the plant that's present. This is a great site as well to help you view the current distribution of different invasive species in your area So if you're curious to know whether or not there's Japanese knotweed or Phragmites somewhere in your area, you can go on to the distribution maps and search for that as well. And with EdMaps, there's also a very easy to use app that makes reporting on the go very easy. What's great about this is it won't upload any of your observations until you're connected to a Wi-Fi source. So if you are out in the middle of a forest, it will hold off uploading your data until you get home. Alternatively, you can use iNaturalist, and you can search and report your observations under the Invasive Species in Ontario group. So the main difference with this site is you can upload photos, and it will allow experts to weigh in on possible identifications, which is great if you are new to the world of invasive plants and you aren't sure what the plant is that you took a photo of. Alternatively, again, if you're not technically savvy, you can also report a sighting to the Invading Species Awareness Program's hotline at 1-800-563-7711. And to wrap up tonight's session, just some quick summary points. Himalayan balsam is a highly invasive plant, and it spreads via seed. It outcompetes native vegetation, decreases biodiversity, and leads to soil erosion along riverbanks. Hand pulling or cutting is usually the most effective and appropriate control option for Himalayan balsam, and it's important to take the necessary precautions to prevent the spread and report observations of Himalayan balsam and invasive plants in general. So at this point, that's it for me. But before we go into the questions, I want to encourage you all to follow the Ontario Invasive Plant Council on social media and join our mailing list through our website. This way you will be able to stay informed on all future OIPC events, webinars, and workshops, including our 2022 conferences, which we will be releasing dates for soon. So at this point, thank you. And if you are not going to stick around for the questions, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Hey, if anyone has any questions for Connor, please feel free to put them in the chat now. We do have some positive feedback for you, so that's always nice to see in there. While we're waiting, if anyone's thinking of a question right now, maybe I'll just get it started. I think it was a fantastic presentation. I learned so much from it. But I'm wondering maybe if we can touch on if people are out and about right now, this time of year, what are they going to be seeing with Himalayan balsam, and what's their best course of action for management at this time?
Yeah, so at this time of year, they will have those seed pods. So management at this time of year is obviously not ideal. So if you can wait until the spring, that's when it's going to be the best time to control Himalayan balsam. But if you do have to control it now and you have no other options, your best option is to, again, just bag the seeds to make sure that they don't disperse further. So it will be looking like what Himalayan balsam looks like when it's full grown. So anywhere from 1 to 3 meters, it will have the flowers, you'll see the seed pods. It will kind of be everything we talked about all in one right now.
Okay, I think people have their thinking caps on, asking some questions, so that's okay. I have a couple more if that's good. But I'm wondering, I know you just had released the tech bulletin, which is kind of why we're here talking about it today. But wonder if there's any other information in there or other highlights that you want to share, or if people after this are thinking, should I go download it? What am I going to find on there? Maybe just give a little bit more insight into that specific resource.
Yeah, so the tech bulletin is definitely geared more towards the professional. It provides you with a lot more details with regards to all of the control methods and timing windows and what you should do in what situation. It also provides you with a lot more information on herbicide control and your best course of action for a small population versus a large population. So it will essentially, it goes into more detail about everything we discussed tonight. I think it's 2 or 3 pages long, so it's not a long read at all. It just kind of gives you everything you need to kind of summarize in a quick format.
Okay, we have a question about digging it up and the tools surrounding that. So would you recommend a spade or a hoe for digging it up?
Yeah, so you can use a spade to dig it up. Again, usually you won't have to because of where it's located with the moist soils, but if the soils are kind of dense and you're not able to just pull it straight out, a spade can help you kind of loosen up that soil to kind of help you pull it out the rest of the way. With the spade, you will want to make sure you aren't breaking off any of the root parts and making sure you are trying to remove as much of the plant as possible.
Okay, we also have a question about if prescribed burns are ever used as a control or management method for Himalayan balsam.
I believe that they are. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I think that they can be used. But again, this is something that's going to be done by professionals and people that know what they're doing. It's not going to be done by someone in their backyard.
Okay, and we have a question. If an entry is made into EdMaps, what happens with this data that you enter into it?
Yeah, so with that data, it helps land managers prioritize different regions of Ontario. So what it does is it helps people track the spread of different invasive plants. It will also help with the early detection of plants, which was the key with some invasive plants that were introduced in Ontario, and which is why their management has been so successful. So if you do notice an invasive plant in an area and there's no other reportings of it, it's really important to put that information into EdMaps so that it can help with those future management actions.
Okay. We have some more positive feedback, so that's all right there. I also have a question about some of the economics impacts that you were talking about earlier and some of the studies you were mentioning from the UK. I'm just personally curious if you know if any of those studies are happening in Canada or in Ontario right now.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if there's any going on specifically in Ontario right now. I know Himalayan balsam's been an issue in the UK for a lot longer than it has been here. So I think that's why they're kind of doing more research and studies on it. But I'm not aware of anything specifically with regards to Himalayan balsam in Ontario.
Okay, and we have another, not so much question, but hoping maybe you can tie it into if there is a bush clearing or kind of like a space of land that doesn't have a ton of plants or trees on it, is that site going to be more at risk for, I guess, Himalayan balsam, but invasive plants in general?
Um, it all depends on a lot of different factors. Different invasive plants thrive in different areas. Usually what happens is if it's a disturbed area, the invasive plants are going to enter into it because it's a free habitat that they can essentially just take over. But there is a lot of different situations and a lot of different invasive plants that you might come across in like a bush environment. So things like buckthorn would probably be a major one you would be wanting to look out for. Himalayan balsam, probably less so in a bush environment, but you can still keep an eye out for it in case it does appear if it's a moister kind of soil environment.
Okay, I think that wraps up the questions in the chat right now. Maybe we'll give a little final call for any further questions or if you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share.
Yeah, everything has been covered as far as I'm aware of. But if you do ever have any questions in the future with regards to Himalayan balsam or invasive plants, You can reach out to me by email at the email on the screen or coordinator@oninvasives.ca.
Hey. We also have a comment coming through. About just maybe some increase in seeing some dog strangling vine in some of the southern Ontario, Oshawa region. So maybe just a reiterance of importance about being able to identify plants and reporting invasive plants or any invasive species when you see them.
Yeah. So with those, again, if you see it on public property or even another private property, you can report those. If you are concerned with dog strangling vine, it is listed as a noxious weed. So if it happens to be impacting agriculture or horticulture, the land manager is required to control it. But again, that's with the caveat of it impacting horticulture or agriculture.
Okay, so I think that kind of wraps up the questions here and your final thoughts. So I appreciate, we appreciate everyone for coming and joining us tonight. I believe we will have a short survey to send out afterwards. So we really appreciate your feedback if you're able to take a moment to fill that out. And otherwise, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening. So thank you, Connor, for this amazing presentation tonight. Okay, we have some more good feedback coming in. So on that note, I'm going to say thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your night.